Well, good morning. Here we are. It's our inaugural podcast with the IKO and Legacy Jiu-Jitsu. I've got Alex Kovats, and he's a second Dan in the IKO and also an exercise physiologist. And Alex will give you a bit of a rundown what his skill sets are with managing injuries and really the ability to turn injured athletes around and get them back in the dojo or back into life, painless or pain-free. I've got Professor Thiago Braga, a dear friend of ours, a fourth Dan Legacy Jiu-Jitsu, a professor in the art of Jiu-Jitsu, fights all over the world or has done over the years. And it's a privilege to have him here today. So welcome, guys. How are you both?
Thank you, Pete. Thank you for the kind introduction. And yeah, it's great to be here on your first podcast in this subject. And it's been great.
Well, that's good.
Thank you very much for having us here.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, we just want to have a chat. We've been associated with martial arts and karate for many, many years with the IKO. I've been with them 45 years. They're about 55-year-old heritage, started in 68, but the Shihans or the senseis were certainly involved in Goju Ryu and Goju Kai from 52. So that's a 70-year history. So that's Yamamoto Soshihan out of Tokyo. And you know, a little bit about your history, Thiago. You know, you've fought all over the world. You've been, you know, and I know I travel to Abu Dhabi a lot, and we were just talking. You know, you've fought in Portugal, Abu Dhabi, Japan, United States, Brazil, of course, and you're now making Australia home, and you're a proud dad. You've just had a little baby girl, which is just beautiful. Take us through a little bit of your journey, how you came to Australia, and you were studying at Macquarie Uni. So there's a bit to discuss.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I started practicing jiu-jitsu when I was 15 years old back in Brazil. So that's something that I always had on the side, and I follow the normal life of a teenage kid back home. Finish school, started university. When I was a bit more than halfway through my engineering course in Brazil, I moved to Australia.
Yep.
First, just to learn English. Visit a different country, have a bit of time away from Brazil. Landing here, I fell in love with the country. I didn't want to go back home. So I kept finding reasons why I would stay more and convince my parents to let me stay. So I went to study business for a couple of years. And that's when I went to Macquarie University with studying applied finance. Towards the end of the course, we had the global financial crisis here in Australia, no, all over the world.
Sure.
And at the same time, I had a very good offer a sponsorship deal to start competing more and traveling more. That's when I started this journey competing more around the world as a young black belt.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, that was one of the things that made me settle a lot more in Australia, because interesting enough, I've only competed at a world championship level for Brazil once when I was 18, and every time after that I represented Australia.
Wow.
So I represented Australia. I only represented Brazil once. Every time they call Thiago Braga, very Brazilian name, it comes with the Australian flag. People look at me and be like, "Oh, really?" Like all my other fellow Brazilian friends that compete against me, they see myself coming in as the Aussie competitor, and it's always a bit like, "Really? You're Australian?" But I'm proud. Everything I achieved was in Australia, through Australia, so I'm proud to have done that.
That's wonderful, second home, and your parents are still in Brazil.
Yeah, mom is here at the moment, but parents are still in Brazil.
Oh, that's beautiful. What a great story. And Alex is studying, I tell you what, quite an amazing career from an academic standpoint, but and as an athlete himself, and teaches. We were just talking off air, how many people a day do you see, Alex, and how many people over a week?
Over a week, about 40 to 50 people, an hour each.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a normal week.
Yeah, and those people, they're broken physically, from early athletes to age people, exercise physiology. You're an exercise physiologist, qualified at UNSW, and you're currently doing a master's degree at UNSW in knee research and osteoarthritis.
Sure.
We're going to talk a little bit about that in a while. With certainly with me with osteoarthritis, and of course Thiago. You hit stuff or you get taken down, the injury. So take us through some of your studies and what you've seen as far as prevention of injury and quick turnarounds?
All right, I guess we go back a little bit. We'll start off where I started with exercise. Started professionally doing it around 17. I started studying at TAFE, personal trainer. Found out I didn't know enough. Went and studied massage. Found out I didn't know enough, but I went and worked for a couple of years, and then found myself at university studying exercise physiology, wanting to become a physiotherapist. But I decided that, this is where I want to be. This is where I'm having the best impact. So I stuck with exercise physiology, and now I've taken that academic pathway into research into knee osteoarthritis, specifically into the noises that come from joints after injuries, or even people have had them all the time. And we're trying to find out what those noises actually mean. So after an injury, you might start getting cracks and pops. What does that actually mean for us in terms of the longevity of our joint health?
Yeah.
In terms of clients, I see such a variety of clients. I see anywhere from the young budding athlete of 12 years old up to the broken 35-year-old who's been a desk jockey their entire life, who wants to get up and move now they've done their back, can't move. I take them through the process, all the way up to the seniors where they might be really fit, and I just got to give them that extra little nudge, or the ones that are completely broken, 5 or 6 surgeries, different joints. And I get to see everyone.
And turn them around, hopefully. Both mentally as well, because there's a lot to be said. I mean, that's where the dojo, they say in Japanese, you're tired, go to the dojo. You feel fantastic, go to the dojo. You're feeling emotionally drained, go to the dojo. It's all about training. I train 7 days a week, and I'm sure that probably Thiago, how many days a week, how many sessions are you doing a week?
Yeah, nowadays, I think I've trained, and you probably will be the perfect person, Alex, to tell us a bit more about that. But I trained my whole life, and now I can see that it was not always the smartest way. When I was a younger competitor, I used to think of volume. If I can train 3 times a day, 3 2-hour sessions, and in between that, I put my strength and conditioning. And if I can get through that day, it's an 8 hours, 10 hours day, I would feel like I'm winning. I'm doing more than everyone else. Nowadays, I try to concentrate my training. Of course, I still compete, but I'm 40. So
you old man, you.
I'm old man, yeah. So I try to make sure I train. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I have 2 sessions, and on these 2 sessions, they go for an hour and a bit, but it's maybe a 30-minute sparring. And I try to make sure I make every minute count, because I'm not going to put extra time above that. And the alternate days, 3 days a week, I do my strength and conditioning, which is very focused specifically to what I do. And yeah, I feel it helps, but of course I accumulated a lot of injuries over the years.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning something before about the cracks and pops we have on injuries. So are the cracks and pops good or bad?
That's what we're trying to find out. We know there's many different types, which no one's actually gone and recorded all these and systematically said this pop means this crack means this. So we don't know. Some might be beneficial. Some we know that some can indicate that there's going to be joint changes further down the line, detrimental joint changes. Yeah, so we don't know yet, and that's what we're looking into.
I mean, we see, Helio Gracie, those beautiful photos, and Professor Helio Gracie, a man in his 80s. He passed at what age?
94 or 96.
A young 96-year-old. There you are, and probably still on the mat well into his 90s.
Yeah, he wasn't on the mat until the end of his life.
I mean, that's what we want to get across to our audience here as we broadcast this live, that it's not as though 40 is your end date, or, at your age, Alex, or mine. It's the longevity to allow yourself to still be doing this in 50 years' time. I just want to repeat that. You go to Japan and you're surrounded by older aged martial artists, judoka. So they practice judo well into their 80s and 90s, karate. You're talking about aikido, kendo, kempo, all of these bodies, and then jiu-jitsu, of course, and what they've done. That's a journey in itself, to how they went from Japan all the way over through to Brazil and took all those learnings and applied them. But it's an old person's art. It's not necessarily a young person's, because you could do it a whole lifetime, male and female.
I think there are a lot of things that impact that longevity on the sport nowadays. Actually, you see, nowadays we call it a sport.
Yeah.
As opposed to calling it martial art. And the way it would have been taught back in the day by Konzi Koma, that brought jiu-jitsu to Brazil from Japan, and in the old ancient martial arts coming from Japan and from the East, I feel they were a lot they were a lot more guided towards combat.
Yeah.
So
They weren't a sport.
it's not something that you will go and spar at high intensity for hours a day. You will practice, you will learn, you will perfect your art, but you will not use it as a sport for countless hours. As opposed to now, if you go to the extreme of nowadays, you go to MMA.
Yeah.
MMA would be like I suppose how samurais will fight days
That's right.
ago, many years ago, or gladiators, in Rome. That this is it. But
Greco-Roman wrestling.
yeah, but these guys are fighting. We have MMA fights in UFC every week. There's fighters fighting 6-7 fights a year.
Yeah.
To the highest level. So the longevity then, of course, gets cut down to what, a 10-year span maximum in your career.
Maximum, yeah.
As you will compare to a rugby player.
That's right.
Once you go to professional level, you will have, that's it. You're counting, is a countdown until you have to stop.
Yeah, that blunt force trauma as far as, impact, muscle against muscle, you've got that collision and that's what Alex has got to try and remedy to get people back to do that, or at least give them a longevity that they can still move, because knees are a nasty injury. We've all had injuries with knees, and you want those they've got to take you on a long journey if you're going to make 90.
Oh, tell me about it. I personally have 3 knee surgeries, 2 elbow surgeries.
Jeez.
Hand, wrist surgery. So I've been through the ropes of,
Wow.
like getting surgery. But I tell you what, I feel that, thank God for technology.
Yeah.
That there's the arthroscopies, and they are so less invasive, and the healing time is so good. But at the same time, like, is there a real way of practice an activity to a very intense level and still achieve longevity?
Great question. So this is what I was just thinking about. So I've got a hierarchy. I've got a number of hierarchies that we follow here. So the first one we go over is the hierarchy of what athletes need to do, but generally everyone needs to do. 1.1, and I've got this written up on my board in my practice: sleep. You need to be getting your 8 hours of sleep a night. You don't heal when you're awake. You don't recover when you're awake. If you're not sleeping, you're not recovering.
That's gone for me now with a new baby.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where you might need to modify 0.3, which is your physical activity. That's where you don't overdo it because you're not repairing effectively. Or you can change up your diet, and that comes into 2.2. Anyway, 1.2 is recovery. You need to be making sure that you're recovering effectively between sessions. And that can be even resting on the couch for an hour or 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can be going for a walk down the beach. Anything like a low intensity where you're getting the heart rate up, you're getting breathing, but you're not exerting yourself. Yeah. 2.2 is going to be 2.1 is going to be diet, making sure you're getting enough protein per day. Are you fueling effectively? Are you fueling too much? Are you getting your nutrients? Are you getting all of those vitamins and minerals that you need per day? 2.2 is going to be stress. Are you limiting the amount of stress in your life? Positive and negative, both cause a rise in cortisol, and that causes a decrease in 1.1 and 1.2. So an increase in cortisol will decrease the ability for you to sleep and recover after sessions.
There you are.
Yeah.
There you are.
So important.
Yeah.
Saliva test. We suggest to our students to go and have a saliva test to test for testosterone and for cortisol and a number of other hormones. And that's for the men. For the women, it also tests for cortisol and then female hormones. And I think you've got to be very conscious. As my daughter says, who's a naturopath, she's only 27. I'm very proud of her. Her partner, he does jiu-jitsu. He's a purple belt. But she says, Dad, men have 24-hour cycles. Women have 28-day cycles. They're not the same. You can't. They're different physiologically. They're different with different times of the month, and more importantly, their requirements. I mean, I spoke to a lady this morning at the gym, a slight woman. I ended up having a coffee on my way to the gym, and I walked in there, and a lady's ordering a coffee, and she said, I'm doing deadlifts today. And I said, oh, fantastic. Now, she's 50 kilos, and she did 80 kilos.
Fantastic.
Deadlift. She said, my strongest, I lift 100 kilos. I said, you are a champion. Double body weight is mind-blowing for a 50 kilo. I said, what about your grip strength? I mean, that's
of course, yeah.
If you don't have and you guys are all about grip strength, then same in karate. You're gripping people. You're pulling in. That's the first thing to go. And she said, no, I'm all right. I can hold on. So there's another side of it. Women are far stronger than men at their body weight. stronger lower body. They're stronger. I think that they're an interesting case study in the sense of female athletes and what they can achieve. You must see some incredible jiu-jitsu exponents.
100%. We even, when we are teaching techniques, because in jiu-jitsu we have a lot of chokeholds and you know, arm bars and controls. But when you are controlling an opponent, and we at training, we don't separate by weight class or male and female. Everybody trains with everybody. And one of the important things for men, I believe the ratios, upper body, lower body strength, is not as opposed as women. Like I believe our upper body is stronger than women, but lower body it's more equivalent. And a lot of the moves that we teach, we always teach men and women, but for women is a lot more important to make sure they are always relying on their lower body strength to finish the moves. You are applying a choke, but you're using your legs to control that. You're using the strength of your hips to apply the actual force of the armbar. Not the strength of your arms to pull it, you know. So
That's right.
all these things I think make a big difference. And one thing on your rules, on your that you explained before, Alex, that I wanted to ask you. You mentioned on 2.1, I believe, was on dieting, protein intake. I feel that more and more, if you try to eat normal, let's say if you want to go out now and eat something, everything's carbs.
Everything's carbs.
Like
it's
for you
cheap
to
and
find
easy.
a snack, a protein snack, what would be a protein snack?
For me,
Like
for
that
anyone,
you could find for anyone.
this is why you got to stock up on your protein. So, look, there's an 80-20 rule as well. My life's ruled by rules. So 80-20 rule, you want to be eating mostly whole foods, 80% whole foods, 20% non-whole foods.
Industrialized,
Yes. So that 20%, you got to make sure it counts with the protein. So I've got protein bars, protein powder to make sure that I'm getting that extra protein in per day. In that 80%, it's quite hard to get the protein in unless you're willing to sit there and cook up your egg whites, cook up your steak throughout the day. You got to do a lot of meal prepping. Generally, you want to be having about 1 gram per kilogram body weight in terms of protein per day.
At least.
That's a bare minimum.
Yeah.
They've done studies up to 3.5 grams of protein per kilogram body weight per day with no detrimental effects to the kidneys, to the liver, to any of the organs. You get
What
all
would
the
you say
benefits.
is ideal?
Ideal is about 2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. So I weigh about 100 kilograms. Getting to that 200 is very difficult per day. I get to about 150 and I start to struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on around about a pound. I treat it the same way. I'm on a kilo, 2 grams of protein for every kilo. So I'm on a gram per pound of body weight. I weigh around about 175, so I'm on 175 grams of protein.
Yes.
So for my breakfast this morning, I had smoked salmon. I had 150 grams of smoked salmon. I had 4 large eggs with salt and pepper. I had roasted tomatoes and avocado and some sauerkraut. That was my after training. So I do strength training every morning and all my mobility work to allow me to get on the mat and to be able to move. Because if you're not doing mobility work, you can't function. Your legs have got to get over your head. You've got to be able to do back bends. You've got to have flexibility of your lower back and of course your core. It's got to be able to be strong. I do all my Pilates and yoga and all of that composition of movement to allow me to perform. But your point then, I can't afford to eat out. If I go to a restaurant, I've got to ask for grain-fed, grass-fed beef, and I've got to make sure that it's cooked in olive oil or butter. So I choose which restaurants I go to, and I just try and top that up. So a 250-gram piece of steak, rump steak or fillet steak, will give me a nice composition or some nice fish. But you've got to, and it costs a lot of money to eat like that. There's the other side of it.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
it does.
You're not eating junk. You're eating good quality protein. I keep on saying to students, it's 85% nutrition. If you get that right, everything else follows. I run a V12 Lamborghini. That's the way I look at myself because I've always trained and I need to perform every day. So I need the sleep. I need the protein. I need the good carbs and I need the fats to be able to perform because if I don't do that, I can't function.
Yeah, but how do you find Pete? I appreciate that, and of course you like you said, it's expensive. If you want to go to a restaurant, it has to be in a specific restaurant that will cook your
right.
meat or your fish that is grass fed organic, and it will have to be cooked at a certain way. But I was even referring more to if I'm busy now. I have something after this. I have something in an hour. I would like to grab a snack. I'm gonna go to the grocery market on the corner, or I'm gonna just pop into Woolies quickly, or I'm gonna go to anywhere around here, and I would like to have a protein snack that will be sufficient for me for the next few hours, or that will count towards my 190 grams that I need to have today.
Maybe some smoked salmon. Maybe go to a really good deli and get some nice turkey breast. Maybe it's available, roast beef. I know what you're saying, but you've just got to be very conscious. Or, as Alex said earlier, meal prepping. See, the good bodybuilders, the good athletes, that's what you are. If you're going to do what we're talking about, this is at an elite level. This is top, not 5%, this is top 0.5% of people live like this, that are training, every day of the week. The majority of people don't. So we're trying to give people that idea. This is how athletes train. Mm-hmm. And if you want to train all into your 70s, 80s and 90s, you make sure you got to do strength training to keep the muscle. That's the most crucial part. That's your fountain of youth, I think, is sarcopenia, which is the thief. Sarcopenia is your greatest enemy, which is muscle wastage. And if you're not using it, you're losing it. And people, I get them in the dojo at 35 years of age, you must see them, that are in poor health, and they think that our job is to get them fit. Our job is not to get them fit, it's to skill them. They've got to go outside and get fit. They've got to take on board, good nutrition, get a lifestyle coach, get a whole foods coach. It's a process, that it's an education.
Yeah, no, 100%. I feel training nowadays, we train them for an hour and a half maximum a day. And in this hour, we have to deliver the skill. We got to deliver the technical aspects. And of course, with that, maybe motivate them to go search for the other parts. Yeah. And on this, just hooking from this protein talk that we had, wanted to ask you, Alex, what I do, I try to eat meat.
Yep.
Meat, fish,
Brazilian.
Chicken, meat. I eat barbecue every week, but
Animal protein.
I try to choose good food and eat that as well. But then there is the other side that I hear often people commenting, don't eat meat every day because it's inflammatory and you can, cause inflammation in your body. How do you stand with that?
I mean, I don't know too much on the inflammation side of things, but I do know there's a lot of other factors in life that are going to lead to inflammatory processes, and I think those should be addressed first before you start looking at avoiding animal proteins. I do know that in non-animal proteins, so vegan diets, vegetarian diets, you can still get protein in from some of those non-animal sources, but they're not... So there's the essential amino acids and there's non-essential amino acids. So the essential amino acids are the ones found in animal proteins. So you can just eat meat and you won't need any other form of protein. But the table in front of us is about 2 meters in diameter. You need to fill up this whole table with vegetable proteins to get the same amount of essential amino acids.
In one steak.
In one steak.
Yeah. I always heard that. That's the part that we always toss and turning about dieting. Like every decade or every few years, it changed what we know. You go many years ago, egg was a whole food and it's super good for you. Then years later, egg is bad because it causes you to increase your cholesterol. Now egg I think is back being a great food, a superfood. So it's so difficult. One of my beliefs, and you both actually with your experience would be able to help to guide me through that. I have one of my students in jiu-jitsu, but he's a grandmaster in judo. He is a coral belt in judo. His name is Goran Juvela. He was an Olympian for Croatia in Montreal.
So in Montreal would have been 76.
76. He was an Olympian there. He was European
in judo.
In judo.
Wow, he must be good. What body weight?
94 kilos.
Wow.
He's the sort of guy you don't want to meet.
He is 76 years old now. I hope I got it right. I think he's 76. He doesn't tell us very much. He doesn't like to tell his age very much. But he trains twice a day, every day.
Unbelievable.
And sometimes when he's not training, he's at my gym with doing his weights and training. And when I'm often talking to him. I see him every day, but I'm often...
Well, he's inspiration to you.
He's an inspiration. He's a black belt, he's a coral belt in judo, a third degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. And when I talked to him about his competition days and how did he prepare, he said, Thiago, back in the day, preparation was very casual.
Yeah.
And he said, most of my young days in my early 20s training, and that's someone becoming an Olympic athlete. He said, I would have a glass of milk in the morning before I leave the house, and I will do my day. I will go to university. I will do everything I had to do back in Croatia. I will go to training straight after that. That's probably at the end of the afternoon. And when I get home, I will eat the whole house because I've been the whole day pretty much fasting.
So he's on autophagy. That's the intermittent fasting. By the time, when you look at the composition as far as how he's eating, and remember that professor from Japan won the Nobel Prize for autophagy, and that's intermittent fasting, that 16-hour window. Once that hits, then the body starts eating itself in all those dead cells. So he's probably replenishing. He must have been in incredible shape.
Incredible shape.
And he still is. Does he still follow that diet regime?
I think not so much now, but he still is in very good shape. He never had a broken bone. He never...
No surgery?
No surgery, nothing.
Unbelievable.
And he's still like in his mid-70s.
And he'd give you a run for your money.
Every day, you know.
See, that's how you got to train.
And he still is like a 90-plus kilo man, fit.
Big and strong.
Big and strong, you know. And I find... I would attribute that a bit to the quality of the food.
Yeah,
probably back in
Croatia,
in the 70s,
farmland.
Croatia, he would never have had anything industrialized until he was in his mid.
It would have been 100% whole foods.
Until he moved to Australia in his mid-30s, you know.
Would have been they killed the animal, you had the eggs, you drank the milk, and it was raw milk, so it wasn't homogenized. So it's straight from the cow. It's maybe in the fridge. Or you probably ate cheese. You probably had all of those dairy products. So his calcium content would have been very, very high, bone strength. And it's just, and raw bones. You see those Croatians, they're thick of wrist, thick hands.
That's the exact person. Yeah.
Big bone structure.
You're describing him,
Yeah. So that's, I mean, as Arnold used to say, you're very fortunate. He believes one of his greatest attributes was that he had very good genetics. So he has to thank his mother and father. Because if you ever saw Schwarzenegger's mother, she was exactly that big raw-boned, big woman. You know, you could just, big hands, big arms, big body. And he inherited that. You've only got to see him what he was like at 13, the photos. I mean, so it's all, if you've got those genetics, it gives you an easier pathway. But you've still got to do a lot of training, as you've demonstrated there, a 76-year-old Olympian that's still training and still got that hunger to train.
Yeah, but that's a very good point, and I feel. Do you think, Alex, that plays a big part in our body composition or what we can achieve? Genetics.
Genetics is huge. So generally, you can split genetics and environment into 40-60. Which way that goes is unique to the person. So one person might have 45% genetics as a role, and then the 55% of their environment's playing a role. So it's that nature versus nurture, and that's individual to each person within that 20% variability in that middle.
Okay, because I had training partners over the years that the more they will train, the stronger, the faster, the bigger they got.
Yep.
And actually,
there are some athletes like that.
For many years, I did all my training camps at an academy in America called Atos Jiu-Jitsu, and the head coach there is one of probably the most the grappler that achieved most in the whole world, André Galvão.
Yep.
And I remember participating in the training camps when André Galvão was running, and he will drive everyone extremely hard, but it's not like he was driving. He wasn't coaching us. He was participating, and he was doing everything we were doing, if not more.
Yeah.
And when everyone was extremely tired, he will just amp the pace himself. So you had to follow. But he is known for being someone genetically gifted. That you know, like
and he was a volume trainer.
And a volume trainer, and his view. I remember him saying once that, you know, overtraining, we don't have this word in Portuguese.
Yeah.
So he only learned what overtraining was once he moved to America. And before that, all he knew was I trained 4 hours a day and I became world champion. So next year I will train 4 hours a day, and I will add judo to my training, and he became a world champion again, but it was easier.
Yeah.
Then he added strength and conditioning, and
Yeah.
you know, and he started adding more and more training, and he just felt that everything got easier to
He
achieve.
got stronger.
As a lot of us in the training camp, we would crash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, you're
so-
not. You can't get a volume. You can't introduce someone to volume training and hard intensity straight off, even a conditioned athlete, because it's a different mindset.
But
It
would genetics
crushes
play a
people.
part?
I think it does play a part. It also, what I think is this: it's the age that you start. I had the good fortune of meeting guys at 19. I started IKO karate at 18, and they were volume trainers. And my sensei, I believe, was a volume trainer. He went to Japan at 19. He was the youngest ever uchi deshi, which is live-in student from Sydney. He travelled to Tokyo and stayed there for 6 months and lived with the senseis. And that was, by the sounds of it, 6 days a week of training, if not 7, but it was a number of times a day you trained. And so that old mindset, you see the old, when I say old, the martial artists that trained in the 60s, 70s and 80s and probably the 50s, they went to the dojo 5 to 6 times a week. They were 2 and 3 hour sessions that would crush a normal person because they wouldn't be able to get out of bed the second day. You've done ab work, you've done leg work, you've done squats, you've done takedowns. Their body can't manage that, especially if you're not an athlete or you're not getting the nutrition, the sleep. And these guys just turn up again for the next day, the conditioned ones. And so that takes, I believe, a time frame to develop that not only resilience, but there's also a mindset. You see those trainers that are all those students that just have that ammunition. They keep on their hunger. They're a different breed. There's those, I think Alex is one of those. You very rarely do you see them.
Yeah, that's probably right. But do you believe, Pete, that let's say the old traditional way of training from Japan back 40, 50 years ago, or do they still train like that over there? And do you think there is, seeing the world how it is now, the sports and the martial arts, do you think is it still possible for someone? Do you think it's still valid to train at the same way, or you think things have evolved and they have to evolve if not?
I think there's still a lot of guys that train 6 days a week and 7 days a week, and they've probably split it up, as you mentioned earlier. You've got your striking coach. So they're doing karate. They've got a striking coach. They've got a kicking coach, and that's a sensei that really identifies and gets them point on. Then they've got a takedown coach. So you send them to a strong judoka that's bigger than them and fights on an international stage, and third or fourth dan, and they learn quick. You've got someone that's then do your arm bars and all your groundwork. So we send them to a jiu-jitsu academy, or in Japan, they've got that, you go and see that sensei over there and he'll take you through that. So I think you've got to have the hunger. You've got to have the passion, and the hunger dictates everything. And if you haven't got that passion and hunger, well, it's hard to turn that on. And you have to be a sensei like that has it. So your sensei, your student that's 76 and fought at the Montreal Games, he'd only know one way, and that is we're doing this. It's that commitment and you either feed off that energy, and as you mentioned, that the grappling jiu-jitsu coach in the States that you were under, you either crash and burn and don't come back after a couple of weeks because you go, this is all too hard, or you step up to the plate. And that's what I think, the black belt, to be awarded a black belt, you've got to do that. It's got to be your number 1 or 2 in life to get a black belt. Because if it's not your number 1 and 2, you're not going to do it.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, the failure rate, I had a failure rate and I was proud of it. And it probably, I'm looking through the wrong lens, but we had about 95% fail to get a black belt. What's your failure rate to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu?
We don't have a test.
No, not a test, but how many start today and end up with a black belt out of 100 students?
I would say less than 10.
There you are.
Yeah.
So it's a 90% failure rate.
Yeah, I would say definitely less than 10. But how does that? And I agree with that. That's our martial arts view.
100%.
It's if it was easy, everybody will have one.
100%.
And but how do we? Nowadays, at least in jiu-jitsu, for example, I train and I've lived as a professional athlete.
Yeah.
So where you are having to perform and you have to outperform other people in competition. And that's when I feel that being able to manage your training instead of just like train the hardest I can.
Oh, of
Yes.
course.
Because I had a strength and conditioning trainer, which is now a friend of mine, and I was the first person he was training for jiu-jitsu, for martial arts, and he was used to doing personal training and all that. So when he designed my program, he ran me through, and it was hard, but everything he told me to do, I did it. There were days that I trained with him, and I finished my training, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I went home and I slept the whole day.
Yeah.
I was dead.
You're dead.
Yeah.
And after a while training with him, I did improve. But after a while, when I wasn't training with him anymore, another friend told me that he was talking to this coach, and he said, "Oh, Thiago was the hardest guy that I've trained because I designed every training, and he will never break. He was always.
Yeah.
He never told me that's too much, but I was trained not to ever say that.
Well, that's the other side of it.
If you tell me like you gotta go and do 100, I don't know how, but I will do the 100.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll break my arm, maybe I will hurt myself, but I will do what my coach. I will trust what you're saying, and I feel that it's my as a coach now, as an instructor, it's my responsibility with my athletes. If a lot of my competitors, if I drive them, they will do it. So it's on me to know how much they should or shouldn't do it, and how to relate that to injuries.
Well, when it comes to conditioning and strength training and training for your martial art or activity of choice in general, you want to be pushing them to the point where they create the adaptations, but then you want to keep them at that point, and that's where you'll see their intensity rates that they say that they're working at will drop. And you want to keep them at a specific level, around that 75 to 85% of intensity, and that's for the majority of the time they're training. And then that's leading up to their competition state. And then just before their competition state, a few weeks out, you want to give them like 100%, even push beyond that. So you want to create those adaptations to let them keep growing, getting stronger and better at their sport, but not breaking them. And then just before they're about to compete, that's where you want to test them. Are you going to break? Can you keep up with this? Can you push that little bit more?
Just before, you mean how long before?
Usually about 4 to 6 weeks out.
Okay, so
Yeah.
quite a while before.
Yeah. So when I'm talking about these schedules, you're talking about like a year schedule with multiple competitions throughout the year. So you got to stage it quite effectively. Yeah. What have you noticed in terms of your athletes and how hard they push themselves? Because it's a lot of a mind over matter thing as well.
Yeah, it's really hard when you're training people to know when they are actually
Cooked.
really when they are cooked or when they are just pulling back and giving up in their head, in their mind. So it's very difficult to find the point where like no, I gotta push you a little bit more, or no, maybe I should give you a break because you might be about to get hurt. Yeah, and I find with my injuries throughout life, a lot of it I attribute to that time span where you have a lot of even MMA fighters, professional MMA fighters, like for example, Randy Couture.
Yeah.
He competed, he fought in UFC until he was, I think, 46. But he only started at 36, 34, or late 30s,
Remarkable athlete.
We have athletes, that are retiring at early 30s.
Yeah.
But they started in the early 20s.
Yeah.
So I feel that 10 years span, applies regardless of when you start. Like if
Absolutely.
you start late, of course, Randy Couture was an Olympic wrestler before, so it's not like he was sitting at home on the couch and he went in UFC. But he had the development of his body through wrestling.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he applied at the MMA intensity for a period of time, which was amazing. But I believe the reason why he was able to go that late was because he started late as well. Do you think that has an influence, or can be played like that, or you think if you start earlier but you prepare yourself well, you still achieve that longevity?
Yeah, I really think it comes down to the management of your ability over those decades. So you might need to take a little rest from competition for a while and then get back into it. So I don't think you can go from working at a global stage and then continue that for 40 years. You might need to drop it down, move into a different sport, something that's not going to put pressure onto those same joints in the same way, and you can start to make a bit of a comeback through that process. But yeah, it's not something that you can maintain for a long time, having the same arm bar over and over and over on that same joint.
Yeah, well, 2 elbow surgeries tell me that.
There you are.
And on this armbar on the same joint, how do you view? Because I saw you are a researcher on osteoarthritis.
Yes.
How do you view that in the sport, especially like knees, elbows, hands? How do you find, because Pete with it's a lot more on the impact side with the striking side. For me, it's a lot more on the load side, on you know, torsion and joints and carrying weight. How do you see the osteoarthritis playing on that?
So in terms of joint damage and joint injury, it's usually based on excess load or excess velocity. So in terms of striking, excess velocity. In terms of arm bars, there's excess load. And when there's excess of either of those two placed onto the joint, you can create micro trauma or even massive trauma in the joint. But let's just say it's micro trauma. That micro trauma can trigger a cascade that has detrimental effects to the joint over time, causing that osteoarthritis. The really interesting thing here is as long as you're going through some kind of rehab program with a professional giving you up-to-date pain neuroscience education is what we call it, you can actually mitigate how much pain you're in. So I don't like to say pain-free, but you can drop that pain rating right down and you can keep that up for quite some time, that style of training, even with those detrimental joint changes. But it comes down to, are you doing the right stuff outside of training to keep the joint moving? Are you eating properly? Are you sleeping properly, as I mentioned before? Are you doing all the things to make that continue? But can you keep that up at a global level with people putting maximum pressure to compete with you? Maybe not. But can you dial that down to like 70 to 80% and keep it up as a lifestyle? Damn right you can.
Yeah. You know, another thing that the sensei has to be, he has to be a psychologist because he's got to read central nervous system fatigue. And some people are cooked. Their central nervous system is overstimulated through work or lifestyle choices, or they don't get enough sleep or high cortisol. You've got to be conscious of that. Sometimes you've got to say to students, no, it's time to, let's not do a class today, or let's take a week off or 2 weeks off. And that doesn't mean party time. That means rest. That means hit up your saunas, hit up your recovery, hit up your baths, those ice baths. Hit up those, you change the mood. It might be spend far more time in nature. Go and walk the ocean, in the sense of the beach. Get some sunshine. You've got to evaluate all of those key frameworks that you're reading how the student's performing. Because many students with over fatigue, that's when the injuries happen. You 100%. See that. They say it in Japan. They read your eyes. And they see you that you're tired at the end of a business day and you're coming in and you're 5/100ths of a second off the pace. You can see it. They don't block in time. The block's slow. Everything. So their cognition isn't fast. That's why we only train in the mornings. So that's my competitive advantage. We run our school. It's 7:15 in the morning till 9 o'clock because I want them fresh. I want their
Starting
mind.
the day.
Absolutely. But I want them cognitively charged. So I run with a double espresso before I start on an empty stomach and plenty of salt in my filtered water. And I've got a lot of information to get through. And you've got to be turned on. Eyes have got to be open, your receptors on to take on board that knowledge. My job isn't to get you fit. You get fit every other day that you train doing all your other stuff. You've got to come there and be warlike in mind, body, and more importantly, that your central nervous system is fresh to be able to be, right, I'm into this. And that's
100%.
And that's probably a process that I think all of us learn. I learn that from a cognition side. I go and I hold, strategy meetings with management consultants. They've got to, I don't need to do that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That needs to be at 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock a.m. process because I'm a morning person. You got to know yourself when you're best to train.
Of course. And when what you said about this, coaches or senseis have to be psychologists to their students. I feel when you're dealing with athletes, with competitive athletes, there is another side that you are having to drive them. And as Alex mentioned before, as soon as you have a date that you are competing or you have to perform and you have to be at a certain level, your cortisol sometimes goes up.
Yeah.
Because you start getting stressed about
Absolutely.
it. And when you start getting stressed, all the other things start being affected. So all of a sudden, when you should be performing a lot better on daily basis, you might be decreasing or at least not improving enough.
Yeah. And injuries come in.
But injuries come in, and there is one other side of this psychology of the sport that I find very interesting, and I've seen it. And as a young athlete, I can look back and think I've done it myself. You get to a point, you are preparing for a competition, you are there every day, you know yourself, you're not going to back down, you're in, but 2-3 weeks out, you wish you weren't.
Yeah.
You wish you weren't. You wish, the competition got canceled, there was an earthquake or something happened and it didn't happen and the competition wouldn't go through. And I saw in myself a few times as a young athlete, and I see sometimes on my athletes that I train now, where people will start sabotaging their own training, and they start becoming a bit reckless, or even allowing themselves to get injured, taking extra risks that they shouldn't be taking at this point in time. And then you see an injury happening, and they are actually seriously injured. But the moment they get injured, they're relaxed.
Yeah.
Because they
know that
they're out.
And
I feel this for me is a big challenge, and it's something like, I'm not sure if the right word is interesting, but it's something like, it's crazy when I watch people, when I think, are you willing to hurt yourself not to do something that you could simply say, I don't want to do it?
Well, that's a sports psychology standpoint. The sensei's got to be reading all those signals, taking on board the body language, reading the eyes, asking how are they, a little bit more than, you're okay. Really have a sit down and a debrief. And I mean, Alex does this, he gets students, and probably the first part of his consultation is, where are they? I mean, in business, the body will do whatever you want it to do. It'll train it, but it's all between here and here. So you've just got to get into there and read what's going on in their mind. You don't know the stresses they're under. The marriage is over. A parent just died. The child has cancer. Whatever is going on in their life, until you actually sit down and see what they're going through. And that's where the cortisol, that's where the sleep, where, that point of view, go to the dojo. Go and, instead of sitting on your couch and feeling sorry for yourself, it's still go and do something. And that's the
message.
That's the message.
And
yeah, that is the
that,
message. Regardless of where we are in the world, that's the message.
And I think from that we can say that routine is the key.
Yeah.
So no matter what's going on in your life, that storm that you're weathering, routine is the key. Are you getting your 8 hours sleep? You're going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time? Are you getting your early morning high intensity exercise? Are you getting your midday aerobic exercise? Are you getting your nighttime strength training? What are you doing throughout the day? Are you getting the right diet throughout the day? The routine is what you fall back on. So even when you know that that's coming, that competition that you want to escape, you know that routine is what you sit in, and everything will pass.
Yeah. You just got to rely on it.
And that's an internal locus of control, something that we can see within ourselves. And then that external locus of control is where that professor, where our sensei comes in and sits down, has a chat with us and says, how are you? Where are you at with everything?
I mean, how many students can't get their meal together?
Most.
Can't get their nutrition together.
Oh, I struggle. I've been doing this my whole life, and I struggle.
Yeah.
You have to be not only really organized, but your routine, my routine changes. Nowadays I have 9 academies in 3 states. So I might be here, or my day might change, what I have to do for the rest of the day now. It might by the time I finish here, I might have to do different things.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden I was planning to go have lunch at home, but I might not even go home anymore. And
so you're on the run.
That messes up with
Nutrition.
with my nutrition and my routine and my rest and my sleep later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one side we learn you gotta adapt. Especially like guys like you, Pete, that have been in business, your whole life. You were trained to adapt. If you have to get up and go, you get up and go.
I think that's what an MBA gives you, a composition of understanding across all the different frameworks. I mean, you did applied finance at Macquarie. Alex is doing, a research degree. I think that's what postgrad does. An MBA gives you the human resources, gives you the finance, gives you the leadership, gives you the economics, understands, all of the global strategy standpoints to run a business. You're running a very big business. So you've got to look at, how you get the most out of that business. And the business isn't running you. You've got to have the right people in place. You've got to have the right senseis. You've got to have, that happens many times we've seen it in the karate life and in martial arts, that you've got senseis coming up, or you've got people get to black belt and they start their own school and take all the students. And so that happens. There's cannibalization in the business model. So they're other subjects that I naturally will get into when we have more podcasts and more appreciation from a business standpoint and the composition of how BJJ and martial arts are evolved, and what does it look like in 20 years?
Of course, yeah.
It's going to be fascinating. Well, any last words, Alex, you'd like to share with us?
So I just want to jump in on that note of when routine falls out. So I've got this one client, and then I'll relate it to a celebrity after that. So I've got this one client. He has to travel all over the world. Routine goes out the window when he has to travel, right? What does he do the moment he gets off the plane? He goes for his run. Yeah. The next morning he goes for his run. He always has that one part of his routine that he comes back to. And who else does that? I'm pretty sure that The Rock does that. The moment he gets off the plane, he hits the gym. He's got that routine like that one subsection of the routine to fall back on. That's all you need sometimes.
It's like a reset button.
Just a little bit of a reset button.
Well, that's your reset as your dojo.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's what when I travel, I try to do similar. I try to find, and I could even not be training much at home.
Yeah.
But if I go somewhere else, I get the itch of like, all right, I traveled, I'm in a different environment. Like, how do I get started? Exercise.
I just say to myself,
I might find my bearings to continue with the day here.
I just say to myself, after my exercise, I will feel better.
Yeah.
That's all that needs to be said.
we always do. Yeah. One way or another.
So it's not I might get on with the dates. I will get better and I will do the exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and that's what a dojo represents, because it's got, all your different your black belts and the grades, but you've got that embodiment that the 5 or 10% that make it to black belt. That's the spirit, and that's the mindset that new students come in the door. They're presented by that. They're not presented by one person with that mindset. They're presented by 30 people having that mindset.
Oh, exactly. And
it takes the heat off you.
Yeah, and not only that, if you think martial arts, I can talk for jiu-jitsu nowadays. A lot of my, I have one side of my training where I train, athletes and people more focused in competition. But the great majority, 95% of people that I train are normal people that are really passionate about jiu-jitsu. And I feel that jiu-jitsu nowadays, and I believe that will apply to most martial arts, it's a chess game for intelligent, using your body for intelligent minds. It's a strategy. And I have students that are, finance people, doctors, surgeons, lawyers, and when I sometimes try to get some feedback, what makes you want to train jiu-jitsu so much? Because you want to compete? They're like, no, not even close. They said, I like the practicing, resolving problems under pressure fast. Because my life is about that,
100%.
But here I'm just dealing with this one person in front of me. At work, I might be dealing with a lot more than just one person at a time.
Of course.
So they feel it's that practice of dealing with your own self in a stressful situation.
On that, you see students that are all over the world that hold senior grades, 3rd Dan, 4th Dan, 5th Dan, 6th Dan, 7th Dan, that don't teach. All they do is go to the class.
Yeah.
And that's the journey they're on. And I don't blame them for a lot of ways. I mean, it takes a lot of energy to be out the front of the class. It's a lot easier to be in the class. And then when the bell rings, you go home.
Yeah.
So, you see those lifetime students that just keep on improving, coming up, but they don't spend a lot of time trying to, they're running a successful life outside of the dojo. They're not a business interest, but they're wonderful students to have involved. I mean, you said surgeons and doctors. We've got the both. We've got doctors and a musculoskeletal physician as our students. We've got people that have done master's degrees in public health. Alex, a master's degree in exercise physiology, probably going to a PhD. You've got learnedness around you.
Yeah.
And that, again, gives you a big boost as far as, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I didn't have access to sports scientists. Imagine if we did.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be mind blowing. You go to the dojo and have a look at the people you're standing next to.
Yeah.
So you get on board all that information and knowledge. I talk about autophagy. I talk about joint health. This is at the elite level. Well, that's what a lot of dojos have these days because the skill sets and the academic rigor that the students have put themselves through. They're very highly intelligent students.
Most definitely.
Yeah. That is. It's quite incredible. Well, that's what a martial art's all about. Well, on that, I'd like to thank our dear friend Thiago Braga, Alex Kovats,
Thank you.
and anything else, guys, you want to just say?
Just wanted to thank you for starting this podcast, and I think we will have a lot of fun continuing on.
I think so.
And I had a great time here today.
Yeah, it's been
Cheers,
great.
Thiago. Thanks, Alex.
Thank
Take
you.
care, guys. Okay, that's it. Over and out, and thanks, everyone.